Hey, this is the Amateur Logician from amateurlogician.com. I really do hope you are doing well. In this video, we're going to take a look at a fortiori arguments, and in the process, we will work through or look through several examples. They're often used in legal arguments, so you definitely should know them if you don't already. Moreover, we can find them sometimes in economic arguments, definitely philosophical arguments, and much more. And they're pretty interesting and unique. Later, we'll look into what are called oblique syllogisms. This is something you will find in traditional logic, and you'll find oblique syllogisms, for example, in the classic book Formal Logic by Jacques Maritain, but also in the much more basic book called Basic Logic by McCall. While they are not identical to a fortiori arguments, there can be overlaps. There are traditional logic textbooks that deal with that. But either way, these are a special distinct syllogism type where relations are involved. And we'll get into that. And in my view, here, the flexibility, the power, and the wide applicability of traditional logic can be seen. Oblique syllogisms are different than categorical syllogisms. The so-called middle terms distribution or universality is not the key here, like the normal categorical syllogism. But here, in so-called oblique syllogisms, things are modified by a relation that is transitive. And we will review what it means to be a transitive relation in due course. While modern logic gives us relational logic, the predicational logic of the scholastic tradition of traditional logic can stretch itself into what's usually considered modern logic territory. Traditional logic is much more powerful than many people think. But presently, let's look at a fortiori arguments. A fortiori means from the stronger. And roughly, we can say these arguments have it that if a thing holds in a stronger case, then a fortiori it holds in a weaker case even more so. Now let's take a look at examples which will help illuminate this definition. Now to be sure, these are not arguments, these are propositions, and a proposition as such is not an argument. These are if-then conditional propositions. But from a more informal perspective, we can consider them arguments, and even from a traditional logic standpoint, we can, in a certain sense, consider them arguments. For example, if you can afford a trip to Hawaii, you can assuredly afford a trip to our city's downtown. We have an if-then conditional, where the then is implicit with this comma, but think of it as an argument. You can afford a trip to Hawaii, therefore you can afford a trip to our city's downtown. It's an a fortiori argument because the premise is you can afford an expensive trip to Hawaii. That's the stronger case. And the conclusion is, therefore you can afford a much less expensive trip to our city's downtown. That's the weaker case. So a thing holds in the stronger case, the expensive trip, so therefore it holds in the weaker case, the inexpensive trip. Or take this next example. If you can clean the entire house in 30 minutes for guests, you can assuredly clean your own room in 30 minutes or less. Is an a fortiori argument because you can clean the entire house in 30 minutes for guests who are coming over, say. So it therefore follows that you could clean your own room, which is just one room among many, presumably, in 30 minutes or less. Here's another example. If it's wrong to lie about small things, then a fortiori, it's wrong to lie about big things. There have been several prominent philosophers, for example, Thomas Aquinas and Immanuel Kant, who argue that lying is always wrong. Consider lying about small, trivial things. If that's wrong, how much more so is it wrong to lie about non-trivial things, about big things? So we have an a fortiori argument. Or here's another example. If a bridge can support a car, then a fortiori, it can support a person walking across it. We have the stronger case, where the bridge can support a car, which has more mass, more weight, presumably, hopefully, than a human being. So if it could support a car, which has more mass, more weight, it can support a person which has less mass, less weight. Finally, consider this example. If the government cannot censor critical news reports, a fortiori, it cannot censor private citizens' opinion on social media. The government cannot censor the news agencies out there, so it shouldn't be able to censor private citizens' opinions either. Now, with all that said, a fortiori arguments have become more or less colloquial, in the sense that it's a colloquial term, a fortiori. You can see that these arguments are informal. Still, if you go searching for what tends to count as an a fortiori argument, you will get examples like this. And these arguments are interesting. Surely the a fortiori move can be used to make reasonable inferences, depending on the context. It can also be used as a good debating technique, that is, to apply the a fortiori, etc. Yet despite the informality of these examples, there is a common pattern, and I'm going to give one possible formulation. So here is one possible semi-quasi formulation. Let's say that alpha has more or the same R, whatever R happens to be, as beta. And because beta has sufficient R to be omega, I'll use a lowercase omega, alpha has sufficient R to be omega. And that really follows the pattern of those various examples. Now let's jump into the oblique syllogism. And let's just from the outset consider this example. X is greater than Y. Z is greater than X. Conclusion, ergo Z is greater than Y. That makes sense. Since X is greater than Y and Z is greater than X, we have all the reason in the world to conclude that Z is greater than Y. Now, is this an a fortiori argument? Well, yes and no. It kind of depends on our definition. But the key here, this argument can work because we have what's called a relational middle term that is transitive. Now, Raymond McCall, for example, in his book Basic Logic, classifies this as a type of a fortiori argument. Again, there's a colloquial sense or colloquial aspect to this Latin phrase. We have a conclusion that is even more so the case. That is, Z is even more so the case of being greater. In addition, Jacques Maritain, in his book Formal Logic, argues that the underlying reasoning, the so-called third act in the mind, is different in oblique syllogisms versus categorical syllogisms. But in the argument here, for example, X is greater than Y, Z is greater than X, ergo Z is greater than Y, we have something different. We have a relation that is transitive and then allows us to validly reach the conclusion. But what does it mean to be transitive? Well, semi-formally, we can say that a relation is transitive if and only if A relates to B and B relates to C implies that A relates to C in the same manner. For example, greater than is definitely transitive because if A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then it does follow that A is greater than C. So we have A relating to B and B relating to C, such that we could say that A relates to C in the same way in terms of being greater than. Likewise, for example, the equal sign. We have equality. That's transitive because if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. Subset of is transitive because if A is a subset of B and B is a subset of C, then A is a subset of C. Or consider the implies in propositional logic. That's transitive because if A implies B and B implies C, then we can say that A implies C. Consider the so-called hypothetical syllogism. If A, then B, but if B, then C, therefore if A, then C. And also less than is transitive. Because if A is less than B and B is less than C, then A is less than C. And beyond mathematics, there are plenty of transitive relations. So for example, let's say being an ancestor of, or consider boss of. If X is the boss of Y and Y is the boss of Z, then X is the boss of Z. You might think of one supervisor being the supervisor of another. On the other hand, something like friend of is not transitive. Just because X and Y are friends and Y is a friend of Z doesn't mean that X must be a friend of Z. In any case, the key here is that this argument right here only works because we have a relation that's transitive. However, someone might object. Are there not 4 terms in this argument? This is what makes the argument invalid, at least according to the standard rules of a categorical syllogism. We have X as a term, that's 1. We have greater than Y as a term, that's 2. We have Z as a term, that's 3. And we have greater than X as a term, that's 4. So there are 4 terms, and so it is invalid. However, it is valid as an a fortiori argument that is an abridgment of 2 syllogisms, because we can reconstruct that argument the following manner. So this type of argument is an abridgment of 2 syllogisms. So here is the reconstruction of the argument. Premise 1. Everything greater than that which is greater than Y is itself greater than Y. Premise 2. X is greater than Y. Conclusion, thus everything greater than X is greater than Y. That's one syllogism. And the second syllogism starts with line 3. Everything greater than X is greater than Y. We add the premise Z is greater than X, and then we arrive at the conclusion thus Z is greater than Y. So note right here that lines 1 to 3, that deals with something that's oblique. And then from 3 to 5, we get something that is categorical in terms of a syllogism. Notice that greater than modifies the subject. It's oblique. We'll give that R for relation, and it also shows up actually in the conclusion where we have greater than. Everything greater than. That's R as our relation. Next, notice the middle term is greater than Y, and as a middle term it shows up in lines 1 and 2. So we'll give that an M. So we have greater than Y as the middle term. We also have the predicate of the conclusion greater than Y. So that's in lines 1 and 3. And notice that X really is the subject. We'll give that an S. Or I might say everything greater than X is the subject, which is oblique. It has a relation within. Okay, with lines 1, 2, and 3, we have that oblique aspect that modifies the terms. Then we get into lines 3, 4, and 5, which is categorical. Okay, so let's think about this. Here we just have a straightforward middle term, greater than X. That's M, our middle term. That appears in lines 3 and, of course, in line 4. Greater than X, that's our middle term. And then we have our subject and predicate of the conclusion. Okay, Z is the subject, greater than Y as the predicate. Whereas lines 1, 2, and 3 is oblique as a syllogism. Lines 3, 4, and 5 is categorical as a syllogism. This is unwieldy, to be sure, but it fits into the logical structure, pattern, or form of syllogisms in traditional logic. Here's another example. Chicago is north of Joliet. Milwaukee is north of Chicago. Conclusion, ergo Milwaukee is north of Joliet. Intuitively, it's good, but we can reconstruct it. So first we get something that's oblique with lines 1, 2, and 3, and then we get something that's categorical with 3, 4, and 5. So line 3 is an overlap, which is part of the first syllogism and the second syllogism. Line 1, we get everything north of that which is north of Joliet is itself north of Joliet. Line 2, Chicago is north of Joliet. Conclusion to this oblique syllogism, thus everything north of Chicago is north of Joliet. And then with line 3, we're going to consider this in terms of our new syllogism. Everything north of Chicago is north of Joliet. Add line 4 as a premise, Milwaukee is north of Chicago, and then we arrive at the conclusion, thus Milwaukee is north of Chicago. Okay, let's step back for a moment. We first have our oblique syllogism, And then we have our standard categorical syllogism next. With our oblique syllogism, we have a middle term that's relational, and most importantly for this argument to work is transitive, but we also have oblique terms. Notice that we have everything north of Chicago. It's oblique. We arrived at that validly because we have that oblique term. And then we have our categorical syllogism. So that argument, that intuitively obvious argument, we reconstructed into the traditional structure, into that paradigm of traditional verbal style logic in the Aristotelian scholastic tradition. Now, I am the Amateur Logician from amateurlogician.com. Visit my website if you want to read a free tutorial on traditional verbal style logic to learn more about this type of logic. If you enjoyed this video, please consider giving it a like. Thanks for watching, good luck to you, and be well.